tourist in a Santa suit, drunk on vodka and entitlement, mocked the stoic Royal Guardsman, convinced his status granted him free rein to disrespect tradition. But when he crossed the line, literally, the guard's booming command shattered the air, leaving the man stumbling in shock and the crowd stunned. What happened next was a lesson in authority no one would forget. London was alive with its usual pre-Christmas buzz. Crowds swarmed the gates of Buckingham Palace, cameras clicking incessantly to capture the stoic majesty of the Queen's Guard. Among them stood Guardsman James Harrington, a paragon of discipline and decorum at just 25. His crimson uniform, pristine as fresh snow, and the towering bearskin hat atop his head marked him as a living symbol of British heritage. He stood unyielding, his gaze fixed forward, the very picture of dignity in a world increasingly devoid of it. And then, like a bad Christmas joke that overstayed its welcome, came him. A man in a cheap Santa suit emerged from the crowd, his cheeks flushed, not from the crisp December air, but from what was undoubtedly several rounds of liquid holiday cheer. Clutching a vodka bottle with the enthusiasm of someone who'd clearly had enough and then some, he shouted in a booming, slurred American accent, "Let's bring some Christmas spirit to the royal stiff." The crowd shifted, some chuckling nervously, while others exchanged disapproving glances. But Santa, let's call him that for lack of a better name, was unfazed. In his mind, he was the star of the show. After all, he was a tourist, a self-proclaimed guest of honor, and surely the guards were there for his amusement. He staggered forward, grinning like a child who'd just unwrapped the wrong present, but decided to play with it anyway. "Come on, mate," he drawled, waving the vodka bottle under James's nose. "A little drink won't hurt. It's Christmas, for crying out loud. Don't they let you guys have fun?" His voice rose, clearly hoping to ignite laughter from the crowd. Some obliged, though most appeared uncomfortable. "A gift from Santa himself," he announced, attempting to press the bottle into James's gloved hand. James didn't flinch. Not a blink, not a twitch betrayed the firestorm brewing beneath his stoic exterior. But the onlookers knew. They felt the tension. This wasn't just a joke anymore. It was an insult, a slap in the face to tradition, duty, and respect. And yet, Santa wasn't done. Oh no. Encouraged by a few chuckles from the peanut gallery, he gestured theatrically toward the guard. "What's the matter? Too royal to party? Lighten up, big guy." His words, drenched in entitlement, carried the weight of someone who believed his plane ticket to London was a license to mock centuries of history. The atmosphere grew heavier, the crowd now splitting into factions. Some whipped out their phones, ready to immortalize whatever was about to happen. Others shook their heads in disgust. One woman muttered, "People like this ruin everything," while a nearby man chimed in, "He's lucky they don't arrest him." Santa took another step closer, his antics becoming more erratic. He turned to the crowd with a triumphant grin. "They're just props, aren't they? Like a Disney ride. They have to stay still." He reached up, his hand hovering near James's iconic bearskin hat. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. James's gaze remained fixed forward, but the subtle tightening of his jaw said what words could not. This far, no further. Undeterred by James's silence, an act of restraint that would have earned a medal in a more civilized era, the man in the Santa costume grinned with all the self-awareness of a toddler holding a marker near a freshly painted wall. "What's the matter, mate? Too royal to have a drink with Santa?" he slurred, his voice loud enough to rattle the nerves of anyone within earshot. The vodka bottle, now a prop in his amateur slapstick routine, hovered near the barrel of James's ceremonial rifle like an unwelcome fly buzzing near a feast. The crowd began to shift uneasily, as if collectively realizing they were watching something that teetered between comedy and tragedy. A mother yanked her daughter closer, whispering, "Some people just don't know how to behave," while a group of teenagers giggled, phones in hand, ready to capture the next viral moment. Santa, emboldened by the chuckles of his enablers, leaned in as if sharing a state secret. "Bet you can't even blink without permission, huh?" His words were coated with mockery, each syllable designed to chip away at James's resolve. Then, as if he hadn't already crossed enough lines metaphorically, he made a grab for the bearskin hat, that iconic symbol of British heritage. Let's pause here for a moment. You're thinking it, aren't you? Who does this guy think he is? Exactly, we all know the type, someone who mistakes their plane ticket for a passport to entitlement. And while Santa might have thought he was hilarious, the tightening in James's jaw suggested otherwise. The briefest flick of James's eyes toward the man sent ripples through the crowd. Those who understood the gravity of a guardsman breaking his stoic demeanor gasped. It was the closest equivalent to seeing a lion twitch its tail, a warning, clear as day, to back off. But Santa didn't notice, or worse, didn't care. With a triumphant flourish, he stepped over the white line, the invisible barrier between decorum and disaster. "I'm in the Queen's zone now," he bellowed, waving the vodka bottle like a victory flag. "What are you going to do about it?" The crowd recoiled. Phones were raised, whispers turned to murmurs, and the air grew thick with tension. Santa, blissfully ignorant, basked in his self-perceived glory. Meanwhile, James stood firm, a silent sentinel, the embodiment of restraint in the face of brazen disrespect. But even the most disciplined lion has its limits. The shift was as sudden as it was electrifying. In one fluid motion, James Harrington pivoted sharply, breaking protocol with a precision that only years of military discipline could produce. His ceremonial rifle lowered slightly, not in surrender, but in calculated authority. When his voice rang out, it was a thunderclap in the winter air. "Stand back from the guard." The words hit like a whip crack. The crowd collectively gasped, the sound rippling through the tension-choked courtyard. Santa, if we can still dignify him with that name, staggered backward, his bravado shattering as completely as the vodka bottle that slipped from his hand and smashed onto the cobblestone below. The sharp crash echoed, drawing every pair of eyes in the vicinity. For a moment, Santa stood there, blinking in shock. The carefully curated illusion of a harmless jokester crumbled under the weight of reality. He tried to laugh it off, though the sound came out thin and shaky. "Whoa, calm down, big guy. It's Christmas," he stammered, lifting his hands in mock surrender. But his voice lacked its earlier swagger. His audience wasn't laughing anymore, and neither was he. James stepped forward, his movement deliberate and imposing. He towered over the man, the crimson of his uniform and the glint of his polished rifle turning him into a living monument of authority. The bearskin hat, often dismissed as ceremonial fluff, now felt like a crown of silent judgment. "Leave the premises immediately," James commanded, his tone steady and final. "You have disrespected the crown and endangered the dignity of this post. Step back or face the consequences." The crowd was transfixed. Phones rose, capturing every detail for what would inevitably become a viral spectacle. An older man muttered approvingly, "About time someone put that fool in his place." Murmurs of support rippled, and even those who had earlier laughed now seemed eager to distance themselves from Santa's foolishness. Santa, sensing the tide had turned, raised his hands higher. All right, I'm leaving," he mumbled, stumbling out of the restricted area. His movements were clumsy, his earlier bravado reduced to the sheepish retreat of a man who had overplayed his hand and lost. As he disappeared into the crowd, the tension eased, replaced by scattered applause. James, ever professional, resumed his post, his face a mask of stoic calm. The moment may have passed, but its message lingered, etched into the collective memory of every witness. Respect, once lost, demands to be reclaimed. As Santa slinked away, a cheer erupted from the crowd. James resumed his position, his face once again the picture of stoic professionalism. Tourists applauded his calm but firm handling of the situation, some even offering words of appreciation as they passed. A small boy approached the white line cautiously, holding his father's hand. "Thank you for protecting the Queen, mister," he said in a timid voice. James, breaking character ever so slightly, allowed the faintest hint of a smile to curl the corners of his mouth. The incident quickly went viral, with footage spreading across social media. Comments flooded in, praising James for his restraint and composure. "This is why we need to respect tradition," one post read. "The guard handled it perfectly. Dignity intact." Meanwhile, the man in the Santa costume found himself the subject of widespread ridicule. Memes and comments labeled him as the epitome of disrespectful tourists. "He learned his lesson the hard way," one commenter wrote. For James, it was just another day of service. As the sun set over Buckingham Palace, he stood tall, a living symbol of a nation's history and values. The crowd had thinned, and the festive chaos subsided, but his resolve remained unshaken. Christmas or not, respect for the guard was non-negotiable.